Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Geneva Center for Security Policy from whenever you are joining us. All of us here in Geneva are very pleased to have you join us virtually this afternoon or other times for today's awarding of the 2026 GCSP Prize for Transformative Futures in Peace and Security. I'm GCSP Associate Fellow Dr. Paul Vallée, and it's my pleasure to accompany you for the 2.5 hours of this program. The first part will consist in an interactive webinar on transformative futures, which will also include a Q&A session in which you'll be most welcome to ask your questions to our speakers. We will mark a short 15-minute break and then resume with the second part of the program, which will consist, of course, around 16:30 Central European Time, in the award ceremony, followed again by an interview and Q&A with top winners. Of course, before we produce the award ceremony, we'll also have our usual prize draw, at which you, the participants in this program, can win seats on the Geopolitics and Global Futures Symposium that is to take place throughout the years 2026 and 2027. So you'll please take note of the dates, because the different modules at which you can eventually win places are taking place at separate dates. In October 2026, we'll have one session on transformative technologies and security. In December 2026, the one devoted to neurophilosophy of global security. And finally, in March 2027, the future of outer space security. So, of course, stay tuned until we reach that part of the program. And now allow me to hand over to our Executive Director and President of the jury for the GCSP Transformative and Futures Prizes, Ambassador Thomas Greminger, to formally open the proceedings.
Thank you, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, very warm welcome to all of you joining us from across the globe for GCSP's Transformative Futures Day and Prize Ceremony. On behalf of the entire GCSP team, it is a true pleasure and an honor to have you with us today. We are delighted to gather such an inspiring international community, one united by curiosity, creativity, and a shared determination to harness foresight and innovation in the service of a more peaceful and secure world. At the outset, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Professor Nayef, Al-Rodhan, and to Anne-Caroline Pissis-Martel, whose incredible leadership made them the perfect partners in bringing the Transformative Futures Prize to fruition. It was an honor to spearhead this initiative and to co-create something so impactful together. At the GCSP, we see innovation not simply as a technological advancement, but as the spirit of symbiotic collaboration, one that bridges disciplines, sectors, and perspectives. Innovation flourishes through the dynamic exchange of ideas, of people and culture. This is an approach that Professor Al-Rodhan has consistently championed through pioneering transdisciplinary frameworks that connect neuroscience, philosophy, global security, international relations, disruptive technologies, and outer space security, including his recent groundbreaking symbiotic realism theory of international relations. Today's program reflects that same spirit, a spirit of exploration and forward thinking. We will begin with a fascinating webinar on crisis management in outer space, the next strategic frontier, featuring a presentation by Niko, Orell, followed by a Q&A session moderated by Professor Al-Rodhan. The second and highly anticipated part of our program will be the presentation of the 2026 GCSP Transformative Future Prize. Since its creation in 2023, the prize has established a strong international presence and impact, shining a spotlight on remarkable individuals and projects actively shaping the future. This year's submissions have been truly exceptional, offering bold and actionable responses to some of the world's most complex challenges. We received 337 applications from around the globe, with particularly strong participation from Africa, Asia, Central and South America. Among the leading themes this year were human rights, climate change, education, and transformative technologies. These submissions remind us that transformative ideas are emerging from every corner of the world, driven by individuals and teams who are not only imagining a better future, but actively building it. It is this collective spirit of innovation, responsibility, and global collaboration that makes today's gathering so meaningful. So thank you all for joining us today and for bringing your intellect, your imagination, and your commitment to this important conversation. I wish you an inspiring, engaging, and a deeply fruitful session ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Grimminger. Of course, I would now invite Professor Nayef Al-Rodhan, so the head of Geopolitics and Global Futures program and the Honorary Fellow at St. Antony's, Oxford, for his own welcome and to introduce you to today's webinar with his guest, the head of crisis management at GCSP, Mr. Niko Orell. Over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ambassador Grimminger, for your distinguished leadership and various pioneering initiatives. All of us at GCSP, and especially my Department of Geopolitics and Global Futures, are very grateful for your guidance and support. So thank you. My name is Nayef Al-Rodhan. I'm the Director of the Geopolitics and Global Futures program and also head of the Outer Space Security Cluster. My work, as the ambassador has mentioned, focuses on the transdisciplinary intersection of philosophy, neuroscience, geopolitics, disruptive techno-convergence, and outer space security. It's now my privilege to introduce my good friend, colleague, and head of our crisis management program, Niko. He will talk to us about crisis management in outer space. He will do this over about 20 minutes, and then we will follow it by about 30 minutes of a Q&A. So I would encourage you to prepare your comments, either a comment or a question, and we will address them all as time allows. Niko, thank you for making the time. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Nayef. It's a great pleasure to be here today and talk about this very important topic. And thanks for the participants, your valuable time taking with us today. As my name is Niko Orell, I'm the head of crisis management GCSP, and I try to focus now next 20 minutes like framing what is crisis management linked to the space, as we do a lot that in terrestrial environment. So let me share my screen here. So, first of all, let's go for the basics. The ancient Greek, they define the crisis as a turning point, a decision, a moment that determines the future. And so it was not just the chaos like in ancient Greek. This is a decision point. 2022, we had international standard of crisis management, which defined the definition of what is crisis. It's by the definition of ISO, it's abnormal, extraordinary event, situation that threatens an organization, community, and requires a strategic, adaptive, timely response to preserve its viability and integrity. So this is this is the base of crisis. We are not just following the news or the public who says like everything is crisis. It's not. When I talk about the crisis, I want that we define what is the crisis and what it has to do with the space. Because in space, it's coming more and more everyday life. Reality is that every minute, every day, space is related. Our communication, our navigation, financial system, weather forecasting, emergency services, military command and control system. So despite these dependencies, our crisis management structures for space remain relatively immature. And that's why I am here and taking you 20 minutes about talk why. So important idea that technical, even small technical incident in space can rapidly involve in a geopolitical crisis on Earth based on the definition which I'm showing you. And more importantly here, are we prepared to manage just the crisis and take the responsibility on it? That is the question. So elements of crisis, I just want to kind of stress this. It's uncertainty. What is actually happening? The secondly, time. How much time we really have to do, we really have to act on such an incident. And what happens if we fail to do that? Thirdly, I want to talk about also the human factor as a stress. How does stress affect the judgments, decision makers? When these elements exist in a major crisis, there's a military crisis, cyber, which is very, very valid today. We've seen the pandemics, financial crisis, and increasingly we might see a more and more space-related crisis. In outer space, the pressure becomes amplified because attribution is difficult. Systems are interconnected and consequences can cascade globally and very, very fast. So this is one of the slides I use quite often, like timing of decision making. And this is one of the paradoxes of leadership, because the best decisions are often made before the crisis even materializes. And when the pressure peaks, information overload increases and uncertainty increases, emotional stress increases, and strategic options narrowed. And so organization, based on the research, organization all over the world, they hesitate because they hope the situation will normalize. They fear escalation of something. They lack of confidence in the information which is available. And you can imagine as something happen in the outer space, do we have the situation where do we have the information we need? It becomes more dangerous because the timelines compress from days to minutes or even the seconds on this even issues which could happen in the space. One of the slides which I want to also take here, I think it's a connection to also the space crisis management is the complexity, because there is a lot of facts, and facts are not enough. Facts matters. Well, I know a lot of book smart people. I mean, they know a lot of things when I'm asking, like, hey, they have an answer for everything. But when I'm asking how these facts connect, where is the concept of this? They are hesitating. But of course, facts matters, but they are isolated to kind of explain the whole system. We have to understand relations, interactions, dependencies, incentives, vulnerabilities, and cascading events. And in space security, this is a critical. That's why I wanted to show this tree. It's a critical. For example, very simple example, satellite malfunction. It can be technical. Yeah, we have a lot of facts on it, but the consequences may extend. For example, military signaling, there is a diplomatic tension immediately, financial disruption, public communication, alliance, politics, so on and so on. So the challenge is therefore not only the facts or collecting the information, but making the sense of the situation, concept, understanding when we have a lot of facts on the table. So this picture is from International Standard of Crisis Management 22361. So it is the 150 countries came together and kind of understanding what is crisis. And space, I think this slide is very important because there could be small issues. It could begin a rarely simple issue, which might be difficult to recognize. And the most recognized when they realize something happening, this small incident can cascade to be more serious, and it could become a crisis. And complexity changes the nature of this. And as I said, it amplifies in the space. Technical incidents could become a political, they could be reputational, a lot of tension between the players, even from the localized disruption becomes systematic. And space, this is, of course, it's very, very dangerous because the systems are interconnected and the consequences propagate rapidly. So I think this we have to keep in mind. In normal terrestrial crisis, this is also very important. The small things, for example, in cyberspace, small incident in our IT systems, if we are not able to kind of deal with them in early states, they could become a huge crisis in any organization. We have a lot of research on that, and it could cascade very, very fast. And so this is the one of the key things we have to understand. So this is kind of a core idea which I wanted to bring here today on the table. I mean, most organizations, they are designed for stability. I mean, that's our goal as a human being, to have a hierarchy. We love procedures. We want to know what's going to happen in the future. We have kind of a predictability. We want to clear authority. I mean, this is kind of in the left side, you were able to see this normal operation, stable environment where you have all this linear communication. We as a human being, we love this. It's normal human business. This is very, very good. But it works in normal conditions. But in crisis, they do not behave hierarchically. They don't follow hierarchy, especially in the outer space. And the connectivity, interconnected system, when there's a lot of governments, there is military, there is commercial operators, there is a huge cyber system, intelligence agencies, financial systems, public communication environment. Image about this unintended collision, for example, military satellite, perhaps caused by a debris or micro meteoroids or whatever. Initially, it may be just a technical accident, but quite soon, within hours, within minutes, it affects satellites, maneuvering, communications, intelligence system may become uncertain. Think about the military planners. Maybe they suspect hostile interference, the world we are living right now, speculations, and the governments, and they demand explanation. What's this? The original event may look as an accidental, but escalation becomes a human. This is why crisis management capabilities matter, and more rigid command structures, because the challenge is no longer controlling the linear process. The challenge is operating inside the complexity environment. The right side of when I was working in Afghanistan 2010, and General McChrystal, he drew this picture of a connectivity when he was planning the operation. He was kind of creating that, okay, we cannot fight the war in the old organization. We have to create something new because we don't know actually how we deal with this. This is a connectivity. When there's multiple actors, there's dual use systems, there's unclear attribution, cascading event, you need rapid escalation. You need fast lines of communication and clear roles of responsibilities. And space crises involve as interconnected systems. They are not linear events. So I think this is one of the key we have to kind of understand to see, hey, we cannot go for the stable normal environment. We are not go for the complex crisis in space, outer space environment with this, especially when we are talking about how to manage crisis. So I think I think there's a lot of challenges here, but a characteristics in space crisis management, just wanted to put a few of here. It's quite often difficult to determine like what's happening. What is the problem? When I'm from Finland, I went to school, and as I remember, nobody asked me, hey, Niko, define the problem. I was always giving the problem. They said, hey, solve the problem. So we, the most of the human beings, we struggling to define the problem. What is really the problem that we can solve? We go quite often fast when we kind of realize, hey, this is the problem. We try to solve it. We have the bias on that. And we are human beings. So defining the problem, that's one of the key things. So I always tell that, hey, take the moment, define the problem. What is the problem here? And then have a break, have your experts around you, and then try to find a solution. What actually happened, why it's happened, and who is responsible for this. Okay, speed of escalation. I mean, decision, we have to define which decision we have to make immediately and which can wait. And this is in the crisis management, it's very important kind of an idea. You have to define what we have to prioritize. What is the objectives, what we want to do. There is a limited governance. I mean, we know we don't yet have mature operational crisis management mechanisms in space. I mean, at least I know, which are comparable. For example, I'm a fighter pilot in my early career. Aviation has a very regulated crisis management system. Maritime systems, we have regulated. We have kind of a control of that. Even they are interconnected, they are global. But think about the space. Do we have the same? No. Strategic ambiguity. I mean, most systems are dual use. I mean, there is civilian and military capabilities overlap right now. How we can deal with this and the global consequences. Disruption in space, and it can immediately cross borders. And there's the crisis have elements of time, ambiguity. I mean, the system vulnerability. I like to take this. I mean, many people like to think about the processes, and we can deal with the processes, especially when we talk about the technical stuff. But I like to take human factor, crisis decision making. It's under uncertainty, and humans, technology. I mean, they are not alone because humans are connected. More precisely, we have stress, we have a pressure. And when we are in crisis, leaders face, they have misperception, they have information overload, they have escalation of pressure. This, I've seen it myself. I mean, it goes for the tunnel vision. You're not able to see the big picture anymore. And then increasingly, I think about the AI assisted decision environment, how this is connected with the human decision making right now. This is a new era we have to really follow up. It creates dangerous dynamics because leaders, they may interpret defensive actions and offensive intentions. And one escalation begins, there's a political pressure, can reduce strategic vulnerability very quickly. So I think like the greatest danger in crisis management is not just the technical itself or the connectivity. It's a human interpret uncertainty under pressure. That's why I want to take this slide also kind of a consideration. Okay, we know there's international governance challenges. We already know this. That the governance involved more slowly than technology. I mean, technology go fast, but how about the governance? We are lacking that. And the current frameworks were designed for, I think, very different era what we are facing today. The space is more commercial, it's more competitive. Like I said, it's connected, interconnected, and we are lacking the robust crisis communication mechanisms. Like what happened, like how are we going to communicate who, what are the roles and responsibilities, coordination structure. Normal organization, if it has a high tolerance level of, getting in the crisis, like let's say the military, hospitals, fire department, the organizations who operate hostile environments, they have a high tolerance. They have a good lines of communication, and they have trusted verification systems that you are able to deal with in case of uncertainty, in case of this crisis environment. But outer space, it's becoming strategically critical faster. I mean, it's coming. Our institutions are not ready for that. Okay, so, well, I don't know what needs to be done. I guess there is a lot needs to be done. What we do, resilience. I mean, when I was working in the European Union, I mean, a lot of people talk about the resilience. What is resilience in any way? And there's a lot of definition for that. We need redundancy, and we do need backup capabilities on this. And quite many times in space, we don't have this. Coordination, how we coordinate it. I mean, we talk about a lot of coordination based on all these lessons learned during the crisis, for example, global crisis in COVID. All lessons learned told coordination was not working in a terrestrial environment. How we can do this coordination in space, that's a question mark. How governments, militaries, commercial operators, how they can coordinate effectively. And governance, we need practical norms. It's easy to say, but that's we need. We need confidence building and mechanisms that we can trust. And how we do this public-private cooperation in situation like crisis, it's a big challenge. Strategic foresight, we must invest. I think we have to have more scenario planning. What could happen? We could play simulations, exercise together, get these players together, anticipation. And the preparedness is not only technical resilience that we have a systems backup, but it is also the institutional governance readiness, strategic communication, and the leaders to take the responsibility that what happens if things go uncertainly. So I mean, I guess I've used like almost my 20 minutes, went quite fast, and I would like to like kind of close this that outer space crisis management. It's not something distant for frontier. It's not something we don't touch. It is already here with us, and it is integrated our life in Earth, and should be also integrate how we can manage crisis if something happens. And the question whether space will shape future crises. I mean, the question is whether we are prepared to manage them, and how we are able to do that in responsible way. Because for sure, I mean, that's my opinion, future crisis management may and will increasingly it will be decided beyond Earth. So thank you very much for your attention. I stop here, and I think we are open for discussion with Professor Nayef from here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Niko, for a really wonderful and insightful talk. Most appreciated. So let me reflect with you from a space geopolitical guy to a crisis management guy. As you know, my work and the work of many others has been all about advancing and advocating for the peaceful use of outer space. That is in keeping with the UN COPIUS committee, the Committee for Peaceful Use of Outer Space. Regrettably, I think we have all failed because progressively space has gone from a global commons, which is part of humanity's heritage. Because remember, humanity is increasingly and irreversibly over-dependent on outer space for non-political, non-military, non-security issues like weather forecasting, like disaster, like climate, like deforestation, like even navigation going from here in Geneva to London, and financial markets and many other issues. So we have failed because, and that can be seen in two major ways. One is the progressive increase of space forces. The first space force historically was the Russian one, was 1992, but the peak was the US Space Force in 2019. But many others have come on board since. That's one. And the second one, if you recall, the NATO meeting in London of 2019, where it was the first time NATO has declared outer space to be a war-fighting domain. That was really a turning point and a regrettable one, although understandable. And the reason it's understandable is because there are very few. I mean, we have the major outer space treaty from November of '67, but there's a few little ones, astronaut rescue, moon. It's little ones, but nothing nothing major. And I think we are hugely lacking norms and responsible behavior in outer space, as we call it. There's very little, including some space traffic management. I mean, if you drive here in Avion de France, and without traffic lights, it's going to be total chaos. In outer space, there is nothing. There is no space traffic management. There's some situational awareness and some coordination, but not enough. So at this point, I'll just interject a question for you. Given the fact that it has become a full-blown geostrategic competitive domain with little intent or capacity to enact even non-legally binding agreements, where do you see the opening? Because crisis management, as you smartly alluded to, is not if, it's just when in outer space. And I think we have the potential for something quite major. But because of my earlier comment that humanity is over-dependent on outer space, the consequence is different from a terrestrial conflict. So what is it? What if you had to pick? I mean, that's an unfair question for you, but if you had to pick one domain, one idea that's doable in outer space to minimize your great expertise of crisis management in outer space, what would that be?
Thank you, Nayef. That's a good question. I mean, and I mean, you are right. How we cannot the human mind in crisis management, it is uncertainty. Why? If we have to ask question, what is going on? That I feel then I'm in a crisis. I mean, if I have to ask this, it happened when something, now this consequences with how what was in the Middle East started, not for long ago. I was asking for myself, like, what's going on? I didn't understand this connectivity in all these consequences. What happened? How these cascading events in Iran, US, all this, the Middle East countries, how they were connected. I was asking Western what's going on. So now, if something happens in space, like how we actually, if you think about the one important thing, can we take how these crises were managed? If you look back, I mean, not just 2 months, it's quite clear. It's also going on. How we manage that as a global, as a humanity, how we manage this crisis situation. What is the most important mechanisms which we try to do? Okay, we know there's diplomacy. So all these were important leaders, they call each other, they use these lines of communication. And what is the most important thing here is that they were trusting each other. There was a trust of some of the leaders because it's based on trust. If you're able to really fast connect what's going on, how we are involved, US, NATO, Middle East countries, how they were able to solve this, what mechanisms they were using. They were not taking the paper, they were not taking the crisis management plans or the communication plans. They were using what the human uses. It connects to people and those leaders who they trust and try to discuss with the diplomatic level. That was the first what was done. So I think that we shouldn't be naive on this. I mean, we should be thinking about, hey, what's happening right now? What's the mechanisms we are using in the Middle East crisis? What mechanisms we are using in war in Ukraine? What are those we are trying to kind of establish to find stability, to go back this normal, go back this hierarchy. So I think one of the most important things is trust. I mean, how we can build trust with these players who are in outer space. Why this is difficult? Because now it's a governments. We know the big players, US, China, Russia, commercial sector, how they can build trust each other. That in case of a crisis, they are able to solve that fast. I mean, I think that's one of the key things here. And we are human beings. And if we think about the future, I mean, and also the past history, I mean, how these cascading events, how we can solve those things. So my answer is to trust, is simply trust that whatever it is, I mean, we know that trust building is important.
Thank you, Niko. I think you're exactly right. But my fear is that that's a really tall order, and it's very, very unlikely to happen. As you know, from in the history of geostrategic competition, the only time people, I mean, I think there is no trust in international relations. There's perception of trust, but there's no trust, and there will never be. But the only times in human history where geostrategic competition pushes various parties sit down and talk sensibly and let go of their binary views of the geostrategic environment is when there is, and I've written on this quite a bit, when there's parity or near parity. In other words, where the capacity of the leading states are comparable. Doesn't have to be exactly the same. In outer space, we have a long ways to go from that. The US is the major, and for the foreseeable future, the absolutely dominant power in outer space. And the proof of that is the Outer Space Treaty, which I mentioned earlier in 1967. The only reason the US and the Soviets sat down, and the British were involved too, but it was primarily a Soviet-US, was because both the Soviets and the Americans, shockingly, were exploding nuclear weapons in outer space in the early 60s, 61, 62, 63. And they realized, when you do explode a nuclear weapon out of space, it creates a tsunami of energy and it destroys everything in its path and doesn't distinguish your own satellites from somebody else's satellite. And that's why they sat down and crafted this very important treaty. Now more than 150 countries are signatory to it. It has some inadequacies, but it's far better than anything we have. And now this carries me to a different question for you, because one of the articles of the Outer Space Treaty was the prohibition of appropriation of any celestial body or part of celestial body, meaning country X cannot go there and say, this part of the moon is mine or this asteroid is mine. That's prohibited by the Outer Space Treaty. Now, as you know, the US, both the US and China, and also some private space companies are planning space camps quite soon, by 2030. Between now and 2035, there'll probably be 2 or 3 space camps. The question is really, how do we deal with that? Because if you build stuff that belongs to you, country X, which is not allowed by the Outer Space Treaty, especially if there's a jurisdiction issue. Let's say there's a conflict, let's say there's an explosion, there's a problem. That's a problem that's imminent, that is absolutely unpredictable, rather than the uncertainties of outer space in terms of debris and cyber and all that. How would you predict? I mean, this is partly a space legal issue, but given your great insights into crisis management, how would you guess at dealing with this issue?
Thanks. For me, human beings, we don't want to change anything if there hasn't been really like something shaking our normals, like where we are right now. And this is, you are definitely right that there is now a competition to kind of define this is my, I don't say that this is a colonialism, but if there's a kind of a space, this is my part, we're going to go now, we're going to use this. There's always the some motivation, and the motivation is quite often to wealth and money, to why we want to do this. It's not just kind of we do it for humanitarian reasons. And if we think about, like, I was waiting when COVID happened. I was actually waiting that there's going to be some shaking of the system, that we are able to more cooperate together. I was naive on this. I was waiting that we're going to know. We had discussion already that there is no cooperation without the motivation on the future. We had this discussion, and I was waiting. I was kind of waiting. And then I saw I disappointed. And I think this is going to happen. It's not just like if it's going to happen or when. It's just like when it's going to happen. Like these conflicts going to happen in outer space, and quite soon. So what I've seen in what's happened in crisis normally, first of all, the organization, they will wait too long. The leaders deny this. They're just going to say, we're going to take this as business as normal. And they're going to wait this long. And they're going to go over their tolerance level. And that's going to be a case. And that's going to be where there's going to be big problems. And then we have to deal with this in chaos. So we will wait. Based on research, based on history, we will wait too long. The leaders will wait. They deny on this. There's no problem. And there's going to be. So, and this is where comes the analyzing the risk. What are the consequences on this for who? And the only thing, this is not just the volunteer. It is about the power in the end of the day. Who has the power? Who wants to win? And we've seen what's happening in the world right now. We don't all this great. And as I come from Finland, our president Stubb already has. Quite many times I'm quoting him that he's saying, yeah, we have this international order. We have the rise in regulations, and it's been a wonderful time. But we are not anymore there, and we cannot trust on these international treaties and signatures anymore. And in the space we cannot trust. So there's going to be conflict. That's what I'm saying. That's my guessing. There's going to be conflict which we have to deal with in that. And we are not ready for that.
Yeah, I think it's a certainty we'll have a conflict. But the problem is in outer space, because it's so consequential, that would be devastating if we have that. And I think especially now with easy launches, as you can see from private space, and the potential for space camps. But it's not from a geostrategic standpoint. It's not in the nature of states to give up a competitive edge. That has never happened in human history, and it's unlikely to change going forward, and that applies to space. Parity, my analysis is that you need parity. You need near parity for people to sit down and discuss things. If you think you have an overwhelming advantage, why would you sit down and shackle yourself and prevent? I think you should responsibly. I think because I think outer space is really so delicate, because we're over dependent on it in so many ways, and we will all pay the price. If you have a cascading cyber event in space or a cascading kinetic, like you alluded to in your talk, if there's dysfunctional satellite and asset, and then it gets off orbit and it crashes into multiple, then we get what's called the Kessler syndrome, and then the orbit will be completely cluttered. And to declutter it would take decades and bazillions of money and technology we don't currently have. So I think I feel I'm very sympathetic to your crisis management being so unable to negotiate space. But I would encourage you and your colleagues in crisis management to really maybe you can help us in the geostrategic domains, because we're really stuck. Politically, there's no will to change anything. There's a lot of talk. The open-ended working group here in Geneva at the Conference of Disarmament, it took 5 years. It was a UN General Assembly mandate. Millions of dollars were spent. Everybody participated, and it ended without a single agreement of value. So I think we have a problem waiting to happen rather than. I think we're running out of time, but I'll just end with one quick question. If you had, as you know, the space security and terrestrial security are intertwined. They're interdependent in good and bad ways. If you had to pinpoint what is different about space in crisis management thinking, what is different about space as opposed to terrestrial crisis management? If you had one difference or a couple, if there are, what would that be?
Yeah, there. I mean, same elements are there, but I think one of the very key things is that now in the future, when we this is the space exploration will increase, and we're going to use more and more AI, that we're going to use more and more robotics on that domain that we don't have in a terrestrial. So we have to rely more and more machine decision making, AI decision making. We have to rely more and more robotics who actually they operate in the outer space. This will be the different than what we have, because we have humans on Earth who make the decision, who kind of understanding the situation, who make decision. What is the problem? When the problem happens in outer space, it will be most of the cases machine, AI, and robotics who will kind of forward us what's going on. I did my research paper in National Defense University Finland about how this information from the field go for the decision makers, and I realized there's a lot of this same message which left from the field, from Afghanistan to generals in Finland. It changed a lot on its way. So how this message will change when machine will make the analyze, but it's going to lack of human understanding, and that's what I'm fearing here. That's one of the biggest fear of in managing the crisis in the future and on the outer space.
Yes, and I think you're exactly right, and I fear that. But like I said earlier, and if there is no geostrategic parity, countries have no motivation to commit themselves to free to do whatever they want. But the technological factor, which you alluded to in your talk and you just mentioned, would be, space being a distant domain, we have to rely on cyber and AI for the most part. And machine speed, as we call it in geostrategic ideas, machine speed vis-a-vis political speed of decision making is completely different. So we don't have time because things are up there, if they're cascading, they're going to be huge, impossible to stop. And by the time diplomats, call each other, and it's already late. So our best, my humble view is our best shot is really to start now urgently and not be too ambitious, but just get some basics out of the way, some basic understandings. Because as you know, there are a lot of malign activities in outer space. There's jamming, there's hacking, there's blinding, there's spoofing, and there's also intentional kinetic crashing, although that doesn't happen very often, thankfully. Although the ASAT test, the anti-satellite test, where a country X shoots its own dysfunctional satellite to show that it could, produces hundreds and thousands of debris fragments which cascade into very irresponsible. Luckily, we've had some quiet in that ASAT testing, because although a lot of people have called for ASAT testing ban, I think countries who do not have the capacity will not sign up to it because they will say the capable states have developed this technology and they want to prevent everyone else from developing it. So I think to me, if I had to pick, I would say debris, malign activities going unintentionally wrong, and technological issues, cyber/AI mishaps that are unintentional, but the end result will be chaos in space. And especially LEO, low Earth orbit, if that gets cluttered, we are stuck as a human species, not country X vis-a-vis Y. We cannot launch because it will be like walking through a shooting range. Everything will be destroyed by this debris. And you may know, and Niko, I'm sure you do, it takes one paperclip, just one little paperclip, to destroy a space satellite. Because you remember from physics from high school, it's not just the mass, but the speed, because everything goes there at about 28,000 miles an hour. So I think I don't have a lot. I'm not a doomsday kind of geopolitical guy, but I think in space we have a problem. Do you have any additional thoughts on this, or in general, before we go to some of the questions from the audience?
I think you put it quite right. I mean, we don't want to put it like, hey, it's going to be something catastrophic happening. But one thing which I learned from, I've been doing this for the GCSP, we've been doing this together for years now, and one thing we learn every time when we go different countries all over the world, we talk about the crisis management. We learn only thing how you can, be prepared is exercising this. I mean, now, I'm seeing that we have to create this, predict what's going to happen and play these simulations together. That's the only way we can be better prepared. We cannot just, we can always talk. We already say that the governance, the communication and so on. But in the end of the day, it's we, the organization, we have to exercise this. We have to put the simulation exercising together, and then there we can define like what are the biggest caps, and then that we can be better prepared. I mean, that's the one of the lessons learned which I've seen, that we have to put it in place, exercise. We have to train that. Then we can increase our preparedness on this. That's right now my kind of intention with maybe GCSP. We will increase this awareness awareness thing, what we're already doing here with you. So that's very important.
I mean, if you had to put just your crisis management hat, which is different from mine as a geostrategist, what's your best guess as to why? I mean, countries are very smart. They have very smart people in strategy and wargaming, and they know what you and I know times 10 to the 15 of potential problems. So why is it that there's no serious effort from your standpoint, from a crisis management standpoint? Why is there no serious effort given the fact that it's so obviously risky, and it's just a matter of, it's not if, it's just when? As a crisis analyst yourself, if you had to guess, I mean, we can't know, but what is it that's stopping major space powers, which are the big three, basically, China, US, Russia, from getting together and encouraging some sort of, as I said, nothing too ambitious, just norms and responsible behavior, which we cannot even get that. What's the sticking point?
The sticking points, there's I think at least two of them. First of all, there is a power, and the other one is there's secrecy. There is a lot of really classified information which these big powers, they have created by themselves, tens of decades information they have collected, and they don't want to share this. There is a competition, so you don't want to share this. It was like a military environment. I mean, you don't want to share this, your deep classified information for your competitors, and that's where we are right now. We are like in this kind of a stabilized situation, and the technology goes so fast, and the governance, it's not going anywhere, and we have a lot of classified information which we want to create, because end of the day it's about the power, and this is stopping us, right? I think that's it's my opinion that that's kind of a stopping point right now, why there hasn't been that kind of a big discussion, open discussion, where we want to go, how we want to create crisis management in space to be better prepared, because of these issues on the table.
Thank you. We have a few questions. I'll read them out for you, Niko. From Michael Gish, I hope I pronounced that correctly. If crisis can develop so quickly in space, do we have a platform or a council where we can discuss tensions or crises and take joint action?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I actually, maybe you, Nayef, you know better about, because not only right now we have a UN system, like that's kind of and the other regulation. Maybe you have the better overview of this.
Yeah, I think we have the UN, which is with its two committees, one in Vienna, one in Geneva, and we have bilaterals between various states. That's all we have. So that's a good question, actually. But there's really no functional global space crisis prevention, if you like, coordination center.
Yeah, okay. That's what my understanding too. I haven't defined anything, and that's one of the goal we should go. I mean, we should also establish this. We start to kind of define what is this, like, for example, aviation. And I'm, as a pilot, I know. I mean, we have the international organization which define rules and regulations.
Thank you, Niko. Another question from Dr. Anila, who says, what crisis management principles, I think you've answered that part partially, what crisis management principles used on Earth can be used in space?
I mean, for the principles, I mean, that all of them, I mean, we should use all of them. And one of the things is, of course, governance, structure, decision-making, risk management, communication, I mean, also ethics. That's one of the things also which is inside in IS, International Crisis Management. I mean, all of them we can apply, but we have to kind of take into account those things which we talk today, which are more challenging outer space than on Earth right now. But I mean, we can define all this, but I think those are, and of course leadership. I mean, that's one of the most important thing, the leadership and crisis management principles.
Thank you, Niko. There's a question from Majid who says, are there different levels of crises? I mean, as a crisis management expert, are there different kinds of crises? Not degree, but in terms of, I suspect what he means is conceptually different. Are there different conceptual crises?
Well,
That's a very, very smart question. I never thought about that.
That's a good question. I like to talk about the crisis two ways. First of all, there is this kind of a hard crisis, which start immediately. We're able to know that this is crisis. For example, terrorist attack or natural disaster. It's immediately tsunami comes with the same time than nuclear power plant explodes. That's kind of what we define. This is crisis. We have to we have to take our crisis management plans. We have to start crisis communication. We cannot do this as business as normal. The other thing, which is more difficult, is define, let's say, fluctuating, slowly involving this cascading crisis, which, for example, we are not defining. For example, reputational crisis. There might be some climate change. Some people say that's not the crisis, but do we know is that the crisis? Because it's just kind of a slowly going there. Where is this kind of defining the crisis point? Because one of the most important thing in crisis management is that the organization, they define now we are in crisis. So we have to start acting like that. We cannot go business as usual. This is a starting point. And that's one of the things. So there is these two different kind of crises. Also, all organizations have a different tolerance level. So as I was talking, if you go, normally when I went to Japanese, they are the best in the business continuity. So they don't even have crisis management. They say we can deal with this business continuity. But if this business continuity goes over this tolerance level, that understanding what's going on, like a tsunami, earthquake, nuclear power plant exploding at the same time, which happened 2011 in Fukushima, they say, now we are in crisis. We cannot deal with the business continuity plans anymore. So the different organizations have a different tolerance level. And if we go over this tolerance level, then we are in crisis. We have to understand this. This is a crisis management understanding. So then we can more easily also deal with managing the crisis.
So does a crisis has to be sudden and or disruptive rather than predictable slowly, and it's going to just reach a threshold where it becomes a problem? How do you guys in crisis management, how do you define a crisis?
Exactly. This is the kind of one of the key points here, because if it's something like a climate change, different organizations have a different tolerance level. They can, this is good for us. I mean, we can deal with that. But it becomes a crisis. Some of the let's go these areas in the earth where the heat is so, I mean, they are the farmers, for example, they are not able to grow anything, or, it affects. So they are already going over this tolerance level. They should not wait. They should say, now we are in crisis. How can we deal with this? And this is a key question in crisis management. If you wait too long, you as an organization, you have to define that you are in crisis. Nobody else is not going to say you. I mean, they're not going to tell you that you are, okay. The news will always tell that everybody is in crisis, but they don't know about the ISO. They don't know about the international standard. So they just try to, to sell the magazines and the news. But organization, they have to define themselves. I mean, for me, if I'm consulting the organization, I'm saying, hey, you should have this board people who kind of define, are we going over our tolerance level right now? If it's an immediate attack, everybody knows immediately, but most of the cases it's not. For example, cyber domain, we don't know. We don't even know, are we hacked? We don't, these companies, they don't even know that they are already hacked, and there's going to be cascading even, maybe they have to, it goes over, the functions, they're not going to function anymore. There's going to be ransom demand or whatever. I mean, it will go on.
But there is no consensus. In other words, in the global crisis management community, is there a consensus what a crisis is? One that may happen, one that has happened, one is happening. I mean, is there a specific definition, or is it more diffuse?
It is more easy for organization because if the organization is ready, for example, military, fire department, emergency services, they have defined in their standard operation procedures when they are in crisis, when they have to start acting like that. So they have kind of defined that and they have exercised that. And when I was working, I was representing Finland in Brussels in a military committee 4 years, and that was a 27 member state community creating, also thinking about how the European Union as a member state, how we can predict crisis, where are we? So there was a lot of mechanisms inside the European Union, the resilience building, where the member states, they came together. I mean, finally it was, the member state, head of the states who came together and defined, are we, for example, in COVID, are we now in crisis? Should we, establish our crisis management mechanisms, which there is already inside the European Union. But in globally, UN, they don't have this kind of a council who defines. I mean, in WHO, in health emergency, they define that. They come to the public and say, now there is the global health emergency. So that's kind of a defining. So some organization kind of defines that. And if that defines, it gives us and the countries to more knowledge and the courage to say, okay, we're going to deal with this in a different way.
Thank you, Niko. Question from Irene says, as African nations become increasingly dependent on space-based technologies, should there be a regional framework or coordination mechanism within Africa to prepare for and respond to space-related crises?
From my perspective, as I was saying, that we are lacking the governments. We don't have enough the awareness of what is that meaning. I think we both agree that we need more awareness. We need more kind of a discussion together, understanding what the situation. If you may want to add of your knowledge, Nayef, on this question.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. The more coordination mechanisms any countries, groupings, or regional, or that have that, the better. Absolutely. They may not have the answers to everything, but at least they share concerns, they share threats. So the simple answer is yes. Africa or any place else, the more coordination mechanisms, short of a global one, even regional ones, will be healthy.
Exactly.
Okay. So question from Ume Yolder says, in a cascading cyberspace incident, actors often withhold information to protect commercial or national interests. What practical mechanisms can create shared situational awareness and trust in those first critical minutes beyond what traditional crisis structures offer? That's a tough one for you, Niko.
I know, Maya. Thank you for the questions. That's a good one. We know each other already. So that's in the cyberspace. The time is like critical, really, really critical. And I know we are struggling right now in the sprite. We are kind of defining also in a terrestrial level to understand it. To get this time is sensitive. We don't have this. I don't think we have enough speed and decision making on the cyberspace. And like I said, in a outer space, it will come even more important. We need this situational awareness and the time. So I think we have to continue building this. I like this. The previous question was that we need more rules and regulations. We need more governance on this. We need more exercises and bringing the players together, which stop us right now we already answered that question too. It is the power strategy with the big players on this case. I wish we could do more, and we should do more.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think the more, since the global coordination mechanism is not there, then the more regional ones, the better. At least some sort of redundancy and resilience, or even just information sharing about potential risks. I think we're almost out of time. Do you have any take-home messages, final thoughts, Niko, that people should reflect on about crisis management in general, but specifically in space?
Well, thanks, Nayef. First of all, it's been a great pleasure, and I really enjoyed this discussion. I mean, we learn more with the participants and great questions. Really like how can we do better? I like what is the difference for our space crisis management. I mean, that's one of the things we discussed, like how the AI is affecting that, how the robotics are affecting that, how we are lacking the governance right now. And I think what we can do, how we can prepare crisis in a better way in the future. I mean, those are the challenges we are facing now. But I think one of the key things is, I mean, all of this audience, we already know that the outer space is no longer kind of a distant frontier, but we are living in right now. We are connected with our communication is depending on that. Our navigation, our financial systems already are connected with our weather forecasting. I mean, already know that's kind of emergency services are also depending on system on space, and now the military command and control and kind of space forces all over the world the countries are putting a lot of money on the military and the defense budget for the space. So this is huge right now. It's a big thing. The only thing what we have to do now is, I mean, we have a lot of things, but situation awareness, that people understand what's happening right now and how the players can come together and how we can manage this predictability and the time and a crisis management better in the future. Those are the good questions, which we can, at least at the GCSP, we can do the best we can do to share this awareness.
Excellent. If I may, my short message to take home is that we're in space. The risk is far more critical than on Earth. The potential cascading outcome of even the slightest of intentionality or lack thereof in outer space is huge, and may not be stoppable. And to remember that because of our over-dependence on disruptive technologies like AI, quantum soon, and cyber, that machine speed, as we call it, is different from political speed. So sometimes you do not have, you alluded to that in one of your slides, that really politicians need to debate and call and sleep over it and bring different actors. Because we're outsourcing a lot of national security issues, but also economic issues and societal issues to disruptive technologies. I fear that something, even if it's not a mishap, but the wrong outcome, then we may not have the political time to offset that. So as always, if I put my neurosurgical hat on again, prevention is best than the greatest cure. So it's best to prevent problems from happening, because in space it will be extremely costly and almost certainly partially irreversible. Thank you, Niko. Well, I'm grateful to you for making the time and for your great insights. And for our audiences for listening to us, and those who sent questions that we had time to answer. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Niko, again. We'll go back to Christine. I think she's gracious enough to give us a short break. Christine.
Or I guess that's me.
Oh, Paul. Paul.
No problem. No,
Yes.
congratulations, of course, to both our speakers, Professor Nayef Al-Rodhan, to Niko Orell, for a really fascinating discussion. And thank you very much indeed to all the participants for sending these many very insightful questions and stimulating the ongoing discussion. So as announced, we're now going to indeed take a roughly under 15-minute break. We will resume the program at 16:30 Central European Time. And so, of course, stay tuned, because we will then have the prize draw announcement and, of course, the award of the GCSP 2026 Transformative Futures Prize. See you soon. Welcome back to the Geneva Center for Security Policy for the award of the 2026 GCSP Prize in Transformative Futures in Peace and Security. So, of course, it's my pleasure, first of all, to begin with the announcement of the prize draw results among our 40-plus participants in the show this afternoon. As you can see, of course, this allows you to win a seat to the different modules of the Geopolitics and Global Futures Symposium, with the dates, which you'll note again: October 2026, December 2026, and March 2027. So, to begin with, winner of a seat on one module, we have Bukar Atiaye. Congratulations. Winner of two modules, we have Michael Gish. Congratulations to you. And finally, the big winner for 3 places, on the 3 modules, we have Miss Maggie Julie Bodo Atanga. Congratulations and well done. So that was, of course, for the prize draw. I hope you will enjoy taking part in these future symposiums between 2026 and 2027. And now we will proceed, of course, with the announcements of the prize, of course, and I will hand over to Professor Nayef Al-Rodhan so he can introduce you the members of the jury who judged for this year's prize. Over to you, Nayef.
Thank you very much, Paul. On behalf of Ambassador Grimminger, the chair of the committee, myself and all of us at GCSP, we're very grateful to our jury members who have worked extremely hard to judge the submissions and come up with the top 5. This year, as was mentioned earlier by Professor Grimminger, we've had 337 applicants from 6 continents, which is an unbelievable number. And we're very grateful to everyone who submitted an application. I want to mention the names of the jury members out of gratitude, starting with Mr. Alexander Barclay, who's the head of transformation and interoperability, deputy delegate for digital transformation and IT governance at the Swiss Federal Administration. Professor Andreas Wenger, who's the professor of international and Swiss security policy at ETH Zurich, Switzerland. Miss Sophie Dupois, who's an entrepreneur and founder of So Consulting Saal. Ambassador Grimminger, of course, myself, and my colleague, Miss Anna Caroline Pissis Martel, who's the director of the Global Fellowship Initiative and Creative Spark. I think Anka wanted to say something, Paul. Back to you.
Right. Well, thank you. And of course, congratulations also to our panel of judges for sorting out through these really numerous and ever numerous applications as well. Well, we know how much time you dedicate to all of this. So our heartfelt thanks to you as well. Of course, with the number of projects, there are in fact so many fascinating ones. that the jurors are, of course, presented with also an ever-growing question of not wanting to miss out on really some outstanding contributions. And this is why this year we're also very pleased to announce some particular honorable mentions, which will distinguish some teams who are not among the sort of three finalists, but who have deserved this honorable mention. And we will see these certificates of honorable mention in a couple of minutes. And it's my pleasure to announce which teams have gotten these mentions. So to begin with, we have, first of all, we have RealPix. It's an API for identifying deepfake images. And this is a project that was submitted by a team composed of Mr. Daniel Martinez, Mr. Alfonso Aguilera, Ms. Lucia De Matteo, and Mr. Franco Conchi from Impacto Digital in Argentina. Congratulations to you. And our other honorable mention is for the Neuroarchitecture of Peace, a project that was submitted by Mr. Eduardo Bonilla. And so congratulations to you both for earning these honorable mentions. And we hope this will, of course, give a big boost to the recognition of your projects and keep on with this good work, which is, of course, so important to develop our thinking and know-how in matters of peace and security. Well done. And now, of course, we will transition over to the awards. So for third place, it's my colleague, Ms. Anne-Caroline Piscis-Martel, so head of the Global Fellowship Initiative and Creative Spark, so guiding force also in the creation of this prize, who will announce the Teen In Project who have won third place and a GCSP Certificate of Recognition.
Thank you, Paul. So the GCSP Certificate of Recognition for the third place goes to Evaluated Agentic LLMs for Global Health Workers in Crisis Settings, submitted by Dr. Kuzai Kreisha, Professor Catherine Panter-Brink, and Professor Hani Mowafi from the United States. Please join me in congratulating them.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to receive this award. I like to tell stories, so I'm going to begin with a story. The oldest story about peace and conflict is not about nations. It's about a family. First shared in Genesis, two brothers present gifts to God. Abel's gift is accepted, but Cain's isn't. Cain is deeply hurt and becomes angry and jealous. So he tricks his brother Abel into a field and kills him. When God asks where Abel is, Cain answers, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And this story doesn't start with the brothers. It begins a generation earlier with the parents. After eating the forbidden fruit, Adam blames Eve, and Eve blames the serpent. The oldest cultural story told all over the world is about a household built on passing blame. A dysfunctional family raised a child that became a killer. I mentioned the story to remind us of something important. Conflict is intimate long before it is political. And it is inherited. It passes from one generation into the next. This also tells us where we can intervene. A cycle that is passed down can be interrupted if someone is there early enough to support the child. We know what works, but there are too few people, too little time, too few resources to help. It is for this reason we are building an AI agent for conflict settings, one that trains volunteers and social workers quickly and affordably, so that far more people can stand beside the conflict-affected children. It does not replace human care. There's no replacement for that. It multiplies it, turning a handful of helpers into many, so that more children are reached before the cycle of conflict can repeat. We are building a technology that lets more people answer, yes, I am my brother's keeper. Thank you.
Well, congratulations to this third place winning team. We will hear from Kusai Raisha a little bit later during the interview. And now I will hand over to Professor Nayef Al-Rodhan to announce the second place winners who have also won a GCSP Certificate of Recognition.
Thank you, Paul. The second place winner is the Principle of Naturality, Semantic Convergence of Model and Conflict Resolution, submitted by Elio Javier Marletti from Argentina. This prize wins a GCSP certificate recognition.
Buenas, mi nombre es Javier Gogol, soy ingeniero en sistemas, trabajo en desarrollo de software, como docente, perito informático y me apasiona la investigación. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer al ambiente académico que leyó este trabajo y lo seleccionó para estar ahí en las primeras líneas. Segundo, a todos los funcionarios de GCSP que hoy están presentes, que forman parte de la organización, que nos dan la posibilidad a académicos y investigadores de otros países a ofrecer y entregar nuestras ideas y nuestros aportes a estas líneas de investigación. Y nada, bienvenidos a la Argentina, bienvenido a la Universidad Pública Argentina.
Well, congratulations, of course, to this team from Argentina. Very pleased to have at least been able to exchange with you. And indeed, I will draw your attention to the pre-recorded interview at a later stage as well. And now comes the very big moment. I'm handing over to Ambassador Thomas Grimminger to announce the winner of the 2026 GCSP Prize for Transformative Futures in Peace and Security.
Well, thanks, Paul. So the winner is the Blue Box for Humanity. The Blue Box for Humanity has been submitted by Joshua Lyons, Guillaume Ravier, Alice Concordel, and Dr. Patrick Marmaroli of ex-Cosmos in Switzerland. This project wins a Certificate of Excellence, a prize trophy, as well as a fully funded 2 months incubation program within the GCSP's Creative Spark in Geneva. That is worth of 15,000 Swiss francs. So congratulations.
Thank you. This is a good time. I did want to say, on reflection for receiving this prize, that the purpose of this prize today and the mission of GCSP is to imagine and actively build a transformed future. And the reason we need this future is painfully clear. Every day, thousands of civilians are violently displaced, wounded, terrorized, or killed in armed conflicts around the world. And it's getting worse. Civilians are now threatened by increasingly autonomous, AI-driven weapon systems, drones most visibly, which are now rapidly proliferating internationally, and they're falling into the hands of both state and non-state actors who may in fact be quite hostile to the core principles of civilian protection enshrined within international humanitarian law. And it's precisely these conditions of modern warfare that make civilian harm now more likely and more deadly. And at the same time, the humanitarian community is struggling to respond to these new threats because of an acute fiscal and financial crisis, cuts to field staff, and now are faced with what is literally a digital mega tsunami of AI-generated disinformation, or now broadly termed harmful information, which is explicitly designed to obscure the true scope, scale, and severity of civilian harm. As a consequence, the technical information that we need most for humanitarian response and civilian protection is now increasingly lost within this new digital fog of war. This is the present that we need so desperately to transform. This prize today and GCSP's recognition of our work at ex-Cosmos to develop the Blue Box for humanity matters as an affirmation to the broader humanitarian community that we are not powerless, that we can work together across many different sectors to creatively build practical, sustainable, and technical solutions that help to meaningfully lift this fog of war on civilian harm and to make that transformed future possible. Thank you.
Well, it's my turn, of course, to congratulate all of the winning teams. You've done really an outstanding job, and we're very pleased that the prize has been the occasion for you to have your many years of work recognized. And we're going to hear indeed from each of these winning teams a little bit more about their respective projects. Allow me first, of course, to thank again our director, Ambassador Grimminger, the vice president of the jury, Professor Al-Rodhan, Anne-Caroline Piscis-Martel as well, the other jury members, for this painstaking work of indeed recognizing these different projects. And so first of all, of course, I honor the winning team. We're very fortunate to have two representatives of ex-Cosmos, so Josh Lyons, if you've just heard, and Guilhem Ravier. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about how the Blue Box for humanity can lift the fog of war. So Josh, I think the first question is for you, and just to ask you to tell us about the genesis of the Blue Box for humanity and how much of that concept originated in returns that you had and demands from field operatives in humanitarian field, and on the other hand, from the work of yourself and your colleagues over at ex-Cosmos.
Well, the problem that we've been trying to address and with our system is, in fact, it's a historic problem. It's nothing new. For as long, basically, as humanitarians have worked in conflict zones, we've struggled with this singular problem of informational uncertainty about exactly what's happening on the ground. And this is best captured in this traditional phrase, the fog of war. The inherently chaotic nature of warfare means that it's extremely difficult to really understand what's happening on the ground at any given moment and time. Now, abstractly, yes, of course, humanitarians, well, we know civilians are in danger. We know that they're being harmed. We know they need protection. The operational question is, how do we overcome this uncertainty to practically and meaningfully address their needs in the absence of timely, accurate, and complete information? This is the fundamental challenge. Now, I could say over the last 30 years, humanitarians have, in many ways, progressively and creatively adopted a range of new technologies, mostly, to help overcome this uncertainty problem. And let me just give you, well, two of the most, let's say, obvious and common examples would include first detailed social media gathering and sort of forensic curation and verification of information shared through social media, primarily by civilians themselves in conflict zones. This is now called OSINT, or open source investigations. And the second component, which is very well known, obviously, is the widespread use of Earth observation technology, satellite imagery specifically, to remotely observe and monitor events in conflict zones on the ground, but to doing this virtually from space. Now, I spent the better part of 20 years of my professional career working extensively with satellite data precisely to help evaluate and identify cases of civilian harm in areas of armed conflict. And in many ways, both of these types of technological applications and uses for humanitarian purposes they've had a huge impact. I mean, it's certainly clear. But there's a problem with these technologies. And the hidden reality is that no matter how dramatic they appear to be, no matter how many use cases, anecdotal cases that showcase how this technology was really, really important, and in some cases instrumental in uncovering information we couldn't have otherwise gotten, the reality is they are grossly and fundamentally inadequate to adequately capture the true scale and scope and severity of civilian harm from armed attacks. The overwhelming majority of cases in my professional experience working on dozens of conflicts for years is that we really only know a small portion of what's actually happening. We are only really addressing a tip of an enormous iceberg, unfortunately. Now, for purposes of time, I think I'll skip the technical explanations for why that is in fact the case. But the question then is for us, how do we overcome this protracted problem of civilian harm? We've used this technology. It helps, but it's not sufficient. What do we do? Well, one of the best ideas that many people have come up with over the years is we can start to document the true scale of civilian harm, not from space and not through the internet, but actually through the practical use of ground sensing technology installed on site where civilians are, collecting information as these events unfold, and document and to communicate this information in a systematic and comprehensive way that no other form of technology could begin to approximate. This was, from my personal experience, this was an idea that I had originally proposed to UN colleagues in 2009 at the end of the Sri Lankan Civil War, to address many of the protracted protection and monitoring issues that colleagues faced in the no-fire zones at that time. And of course, it wasn't a unique idea of mine. It was also independently developed by colleagues in the International Committee of the Red Cross, and particularly Dr. Robert Copeland, who proposed virtually the same technological idea within the Healthcare in Danger project in 2016. And, well, it should be obvious now, in both of these cases, the issue is not conceptual. Right? It's not the challenge is not to come up with a theoretical solution to our problems. It's practical. It's institutional. Now, humanitarians, we're really good at buying things and talking about technology, but the one thing humanitarian organizations are not designed to do is to practically build technology. We don't manufacture things, we just buy it, we use it. And well, it was clear after many years of discussions between colleagues about this tantalizing idea that the only way we were ever really going to get it was if we built it ourselves. And that is, in fact, exactly the reason why I and other wonderful colleagues have stepped back from our operational work in a humanitarian context to create Ex-Cosmos as this Swiss-based startup company to build this monitoring system that we now call the Blue Box for Humanity.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, there's quite a fascinating history to this project. And indeed, I'm going to ask Guilhem, of course, what specific problems in civilian harm and conflict has the blue box been conceived to overcome? We'll see that.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot to you, Paul, and to everyone at GCSP for this prize and the recognition of this initiative. And congratulations in particular to Josh, whose leadership on this project has been really key, and to the other team members, Alice and Patrick. The Blue Box intends to change the way we perceive and react to harm against civilians and to help overcome the growing fog of misinformation Josh mentioned earlier. Take some real life situations: a hospital, a school, a camp for displaced persons, or humanitarian agencies' field office come under artillery fire. The people there need to take shelter to help those that can't move themselves, the vulnerable persons, attend to the wounded. They don't really have time to call on the phone or the radio to report and ask for help or ceasefire. Or take a mobile team in vehicles that also comes under shelling in the countryside and is unable to report and request support. The call may come later, after fire has stopped and damage has been done. The attacks may be documented even later and be added to a pile of statistics that may inform at some point the protection dialogue with the parties to the conflict. But all that much later. Another case is numerous attacks have been reported, but many turn out to be AI-empowered fakes that make it difficult to understand what's going on. With timely and accurate information, the Blue Box can support more effective action to protect civilians. The Blue Box intends to automate what is normally done manually and slowly by humanitarian and emergency services so that they can focus on their work and respond to needs. With the Blue Box, in the previous examples that I mentioned, the information on the attacks would have been rapidly transmitted to another team in a safe location automatically. That team would have been able to assess the situation and to take immediate action, for instance, calling the parties to the conflict to take precautionary measures or to ceasefire or to send emergency services.
Thank you, Guilhem. Of course, that's really illuminating and illustrative. So I think we're seeing just how fascinating and helpful what you've been working on is going to change a little bit the way we operate in such crises situations as well. And so, of course, as a consequence of winning the prize, your team will have a residency period here at the GCSP. And so we'll go back to Josh as well and see, what sort of hopes and plans have you begin to formulate for this period, which, what sort of organizations or research institutions in international Geneva you're expecting to engage with to develop the Blue Box?
Well, thank you. It's very exciting, and hopefully what we are looking for is quite simple in many ways. What we really need and are hoping to obtain through GCSD is a range of guidance, expertise, and I think also a structured space to think through a range of key issues as we are now moving from a conceptual prototype towards an industrial product that is genuinely fit for the operational needs of humanitarians for civilian protection applications. So specifically, our goal is to work with GCSP to convene ideally a small, diverse group of specialist advisors to help us with the technical evaluation, validation, and field testing of our Blue Box system. The practical challenge that we face is simply that, well, we're developing this equipment for commercial use, essentially, that does not have an applicable international certification standard. There is no ISO standard that fits what we want to do and how we want this box to be used in practical applications for civilian protection. And in this context, in order for us to certify this product, in order for humanitarian agencies and a diverse range of local, civil protection authorities to feel comfortable and to deploy the equipment and to use the information that it provides them, we need essentially to build up a set of functional standards and verification protocols that address our applications and needs. And we have to do this ourselves, basically. And this is really where the role of GCSP can help. We need this input from multiple fields, including humanitarian law, security policy, and military technology. Exactly the kind of multidisciplinary environment GCSP is known for. This is what we really need to build for that process. And ideally, what we'd really like is for support and structured guidance through GCSP to help coordinate with, for example, the Swiss military in order to conduct realistic live fire testing of our equipment when it's ready. In summary, we are deeply grateful for this prize and this recognition from GCSP, and we are looking forward to collaborating with you and the network to help ensure that this blue box for humanity becomes a credible tool for civilian protection.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I know personally, I'm looking forward to having the occasion to run into you in the hallways here at Maison de la Paix when you're over here. So indeed, congratulations. And of course, hoping that you can connect with as many interested parties as possible. We do have some people who are forwarding through the Q&A some questions that you'll be able to see. And if you're not able to answer them at this moment, certainly you can keep them on record and maybe be in contact with these people later on as well. So we'll probably come back to you a little later. Now we are going to move over to our second place winners. So we will play the video of the questions that I forwarded to Javier Meletti back down in Argentina, and hopefully you will be able to hear his answers in Spanish for those of you who master the language, and with subtitles below as well. My first question is, where does this original concept of finding alternative pathways to peace originate from? You developed this framework as an independent researcher in Argentina. So what led you to approach the conflict resolution from this particular angle?
Desde joven escuché que ante una discusión, ante un conflicto entre dos personas, aquel que usaba la lógica como insumo o como herramienta era el que terminaba teniendo la razón. Este pensamiento me persiguió por mucho tiempo, pero sumándole el condimento de que qué pasaba si ambas personas usaban la lógica, ¿quién terminaba teniendo la razón? Y peor aún, si desde su propio punto de vista, desde su propio contexto, mantenían una coherencia en sus verdades, estábamos ante una dicotomía de cómo poder resolver o encuadrar y darle una solución a dicho conflicto. Por lo tanto, al principio creía que necesitábamos de una superlógica o una lógica suprema que nos permitiera gobernar estas lógicas individuales y poder encuadrarlas, encauzarlas para darles una salida, una solución. Pero siempre esa mirada me llevaba a un lugar más filosófico, religioso, sobrenatural, y me alejaba de las ciencias, al menos de las ciencias que yo conozco. Por lo tanto decidí que en vez de tener esa mirada más universal, debía resolverlo en el lado opuesto, mirando hacia abajo. Y ahí es donde nace esta investigación, porque al mirarlo hacia abajo me permitió poder encontrar caminos alternativos que ofrezcan a mediadores, a negociadores, a diplomáticos, un punto de partida. Si vamos a un problema geopolítico, hay algo que los mantiene unidos, que es el problema en sí, si no, nos formarían parte de él. Pero el problema se intensifica cuando las posturas de cada uno no pueden ser alteradas, porque obviamente si cedemos de un lugar estamos dándole el terreno al otro. Entonces estamos ante una situación donde hay un problema, hay un conflicto determinado, expuesto, y hay posturas que son opuestas o incompatibles unas con las otras. Entonces el desafío estaba en poder encontrar de qué forma poder entregar o ofrecer un camino de solución sin modificar la postura inicial de cada uno. Por lo tanto, si yo generaba un modelo computacional que me permitiera indagar esa postura y preguntarle ¿por qué pensás lo que pensás? Y esas preguntas expresarlas de forma proposicionales, que fueran premisas, que pudieran tener un valor de verdad, verdadero y falso. Obviamente van a ser verdaderas para cada uno de los actores, que no significa que sean verdaderas para el otro. Pero yo podría conformar un árbol de causalidad, de premisas encadenadas unas con otras, y luego esos pensamientos que fundamentan el pensamiento de esa postura, poder compararlos contra las del otro actor. Y allí, en esa comparación lógica, matemática y geométrica, poder encontrar puntos de acuerdo, puntos en común. Porque si bien podemos ser muy diferentes en la superficie, cuando empezamos a preguntarnos por qué sostenemos lo que sostenemos, es muy probable que lleguemos a lugares donde tengamos muchas cuestiones en común más que diferentes.
Second, you used the GERD transboundary dispute between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan as one of the empirical cases to test this framework. So how did you choose this particular case?
Este campo de investigación necesitaba dos tipos de problemas, uno real y uno ficticio. No solamente se quedó con la formulación teórica del mismo, sino que se implementó mediante la algoritmia en un modelo computacional todos los pasos, desde la fase cero, desde el diseño del conflicto, hasta la salida final del mismo. El caso real, GERD cumplía con todas estas condiciones porque tenía muchos años de evolución, teníamos información, documentación pública accesible, en la cual podíamos comparar lo que el modelo computacional iba ofreciendo versus lo que pasó en realidad versus la situación actual, el presente de dicho conflicto. Y por otro lado necesitábamos un caso ficticio, donde le diera todo el poder al modelo computacional y se pudiera anular el conocimiento que un LLM, que la IA podía llegar a tener de dicho conflicto. Por lo tanto, si podía resolver algo ficticio, significa que no tenía de dónde tomar conocimiento del mismo y simplemente usaba todo el poder del modelo para poder encontrar estos puntos en común ante una situación determinada.
Are you planning to test the principle of naturality on other ongoing peace processes? And what are the challenges to do so?
El principio de la naturalidad hoy se presenta a dos tipos de desafíos. Primero es continuar con esta investigación, hacer un análisis de los datos geométricos matemáticos que deja toda la algoritmia en una simulación, ver qué forma topológica tienen estos datos, si estas formas topológicas son recurrentes bajo ciertas temáticas, cuáles son los umbrales de configuración óptimos para una simulación según la temática de un conflicto. Hay muchas cuestiones que hay que analizar y que se van a evaluar, pero ya en un proceso de ejecución. Por lo tanto, esto invita al segundo desafío, que lo interesante sería que este modelo computacional esté inmerso en un ambiente académico que le permita ejecutar continuamente distintos tipos de conflictos, distintos tipos de temáticas, y en base a eso no solo asistir, ayudar a académicos, diplomáticos, sino también al modelo en sí, que sea una forma de retroalimentación para buscar mejores estrategias, mejores formas matemáticas de poder encuadrar, encauzar y analizar los conflictos desde todos los ángulos posibles.
Finally, I'd like to ask you, how can recognition of the 2026 GCSP Prize for Transformative Futures help you to develop and further enhance the use of the principle of naturality by scientists and practitioners working for peace?
Este premio se toma como un cariño ante todo el trabajo y la investigación realizada, pero es solo el comienzo, es solo un punto de partida. En un mundo tan roto, tan fracturado, donde continuamente fallamos como seres humanos, como sociedad, necesitamos detener las guerras, necesitamos encontrar las formas de poder entendernos y comunicarnos mejor. Si esta investigación aporta un granito de arena a que enterremos las armas, ese sería su verdadero premio. La pólvora no resuelve los problemas, solo entierra las soluciones.
So very inspiring words from Javier Meletti. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. And again, we'll be in touch and hopefully be able to forward more questions of you over to him as well. And we're now moving to the third place team, over to Dr. Husai Kraisha at Yale University. Congratulations on this third place. Pleasure to speak with you today. And of course, my first question would be, because of course your team is a multinational endeavor as well. So how did the different actors from Yale, ECPC, and Turkey, and Ireland, and Jordan come together to participate in the development of your project?
Sure. Thank you, Paul, for everything and the questions that you're asking, and everybody else for organizing such a brilliant event. I'm really honored to be here. So, as you mentioned, we have partners across multiple countries. They all came together. Sorry, I lost my voice in the moment that I needed it. Always happens. So there are multiple actors involved in this from multiple countries. And we all come together to face the same problem, really, which is how do we help a growing scale of a problem involving children affected by war. So every year, the number of displaced people is increasing. And obviously, look around, war is not going down, it's going up. So obviously, and the people who are most impacted by war are civilians and mostly children who are most vulnerable. So how do we respond to that? And this is a problem that happens across contexts. So in Jordan, for example, we're working with our partner to actually talk with health workers who were displaced from Gaza, to see how the agent and if the agent that we're developing would support people in that context, because it's going to be hard to sort of do research there. But the partners in Turkey, we're looking there at protracted crisis. Obviously, Turkey hosts a lot of people affected by conflict for a long time, and so it's a different context, obviously, being a protracted crisis than an emergency context. But the same problem exists in a different way. So there, in an acute emergency situation, you need to train people really quickly. In protracted crisis, you have perhaps a lot of people that and you have time, but maybe you don't have a lot of expertise. And finally, like in Ireland, it's more of a high-income country, but that hosts a lot of refugees, but has underfunded kind of social institutions. And so, how do you reduce that cost? Again, in all of these organizations that we work with have faced the same problem, but just different angles. So that's how we came together.
Well, yeah, that's certainly, a great start to the story. And so, of course, we can elaborate now. And then my next question would be, of course, how is the AI tool that you've designed benefit frontline workers? And what type of problems and situations is it designed to overcome?
Yeah, so the idea here is that we are creating a tool to help people respond, first respond situation. So, and particularly like to help people who are who might not have a lot of experience, who might be volunteers. It's not really replacing the senior workers, the people who have worked, for example, with a child for a long time, or experts in the field. It's just really to be able to bring way more people to be able to respond to the huge crisis that we're facing. I think it's always the case that you have a lot of people who really are interested in helping, but there's just not enough time to train them. And I think people know that a lot of that interest fades away with time. So there's also, a risk of putting a lot of resources in training, like a lot of, for example, young people who could help, and then they would just lose interest in maybe a few months, and then all that time is wasted training them. But if we can make the training much faster and cheaper, then we can harness that sort of largely kind of untapped resource and be able to provide more support at the first response to children and their families.
Yes, well, very good. And of course, the other question would be, are some areas and conflict zones particularly in more need to be equipped with this tool? And then how would the AI tool benefit those areas and zones?
Yeah, so I'll be quick here because it's kind of similar to the first question in some ways, but I'll add some numbers. So, for example, in Gaza, we see a lot of children showing up to hospitals without any surviving family members, and they're wounded. And then I think the latest figures show like 17,000, but obviously, the situation is very unstable and slightly hard to detect all the kids. But the idea is that these children show up, and then somebody from the hospital, like a young medical worker, for example, then needs to provide care for them, long-term care for them, and they might not have no experience whatsoever in taking care of a child before. So and nobody have time to train them, of course. So this is a situation in which acute emergency situation that you would need some sort of quick guidance on what to do, and a lot of it is really it's sort of easy to follow advice about how to be responsive to certain needs, but you need somebody to tell you, and in these situations nobody is there to tell you what to do. And then, for example, even in protracted crisis and other situations, it's very, very unstable. Like, for example, recently clashes in Syria, renewed clashes in Syria, displaced about, I think, 200,000 people again. So in these situations, when you have a huge influx of people suddenly displaced, you need to be able to kind of gather as much people as possible to respond to that sort of wave of people. And so these are kind of examples of conflicts and crisis that the agent would be useful there.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for going into these details in particular. And so, of course, as for other teams, I'd like to ask you what the recognition by the GCSP Prize for Transformative Futures means for your team, as well as for your tool.
Yeah, so it's a huge honor, and first, I think it gives us recognition about our work, and it underscores the peace-building elements of our work. That if children who are affected by conflict, of course, that generates a lot of conflict in them, and so if we interrupt that cycle by providing responsive care, we can also promote an intergenerational pathway to peace. The second thing I think is responsibility, that we are now even more committed. We were committed before, but even more committed to creating something that is of course, first and foremost, safe to use and useful to people. And I think third is reach. It gives us a platform. There goes my voice again. It gives us a platform to connect with people even broader to the ecosystem that we have, talking to humanitarianism, policymakers, and people working in various parts of the world. Yeah, we're really excited about this prize and recognition, and we're looking forward to keep the conversation going and to connect with everybody here.
Thank you, Kusai. I think we're also delighted to be in touch with you through this way, and certainly if we get any more contacts and questions, we'll certainly forward them to you as well. So, of course, congratulations to you and to your colleagues. We do have a little time, indeed, for more Q&A. I've received one, which I'm pleased to say, of course, comes from Eduardo Bonilla, who is the team that received an honorable mention. So I think it's really worth relaying this question. And I believe the question is for Josh and Guilhem. Part of it, you will have
I see it,
answered. Yeah. And so Eduardo asks, about the kind of information that can be collected by Blue Box, and how indeed how is it meant to be handled and utilized, and whether it's information after the fact or preventative, and of course how is that meant to operate in the future?
Well, I technically see that there's actually a question immediately above it that's addressed to me, but it's in relationship to a cyberspace crisis. I'm happy to talk about my opinions about outer space security, but cyberspace is beyond me. I'll defer to everyone else on that one. In terms of Eduardo's question, well, technically, for obvious purposes of privacy, safety, and security, our box is not purposefully designed not to collect information about or from civilians. I've been involved in that alternative world where people are flying drones and collecting very, very personally intrusive and easily identifiable information from social media and other sources, and fusing that all together for purposes of an investigation. But in reality, what they've really been doing is collecting dossiers of potential evidence to be used by abusive governments against their own civilian population. This is specifically a problem related to OSINT investigations, where people are releasing all sorts of very, very dangerous information about where a particular video was recorded, for example. The box is purposefully designed to be absolutely devoid of any ability or any content that would relate to a specific person or to a specific community. The only thing that this box is aware of is essentially it is an environmental pollution station. It's just measuring environmental pollution that happens to be directly related to war. And the creativity behind this is simply the knowledge to understand the types of information that's embedded in these ambient signals, in air pollution, in basically weather, knowing how to interpret the buried information, the signals within that environmental information, gives us unique insights about armed attacks that may in fact be endangering civilians. So that really is the purpose. The issue about is it for collection of an event or is it for life-saving measures? Now, I have a particular experience with this, which was working in the UN system the game of how you got funding was that you got the new technology and then you immediately front loaded on that technology. It's going to save lives. It's going to do all of these heroic things. And my reaction normally was, well, clean water, hospital staff, humans save lives. Technology does not. There are many emergency alert systems that are being marketed to be sure. Let's take, for example, the infamous Google earthquake alert network that was designed to give very quick, short notice, advanced alerts to people in advance of an expected shockwave, an earthquake coming their way. And the idea was they'd get an alert and they'd have 10 or 15 seconds to basically duck and cover, to hide somewhere, to get into a safe position before that main shockwave came. And it's Google. Now, they spent an unknown amount of money on it with a vast amount of scientific and engineering expertise. And that system, as far as we know, failed spectacularly in Syria and Turkey for reasons that we still do not know. There are multiple examples where systems have promised the sky and the moon to protect people's lives. And in reality, what it's happened is it creates a dangerous dependency on an alert. And when someone is waiting for their phone to tell them what to do, it creates a new form of vulnerability. The complexity, it's a wonderful dream. Yes, it would be great to imagine a box that magically understood when the drones were coming and which ways the missiles were coming and all of this architecture that we dream about every day. The problem is the signatures of these weapon systems change. The technology changes, and you build a system that might be able to hear it coming, might be able to see it coming and send an alert. The next day, that system is replaced with something different, and now the system is completely irrelevant. There really, in most practical ways, there is no a warning system that you can deploy that would give meaningful protection for civilians. We view protection in a different way. If the system is deployed in sufficient density and the information is acquired and given to the right hands, there is a magical opportunity to create a new type of affirmative, preventative diplomacy, what we would call a harm mitigation strategy for humanitarians who will be able to intervene and assertively confront military authorities with conclusive, validated information about an ongoing series of attacks that are potentially recklessly endangering civilians, potentially unknown to that military force. I mean, it's not by any means the case that every attack that hurts a civilian was somehow intentional. The fog of war works for every side, and unfortunately, military forces may do their very best to control for civilian harm, and yet it still happens. And in a multitude of possible scenarios, what we hope for is that the box is giving near real-time information about ongoing attacks that humanitarians can use to help moderate and protect and limit potential civilian casualties dynamically.
Well, listen, thank you, Josh, for, of course, further elaborating on that and answering this question from Eduardo. I mean, I know, in the community, there are probably, of course, a lot of more people who are very eager to keep this dialogue going, but we're approaching the close of our ceremony. So, of course, I'll certainly invite you all, for those of you who still have interests and questions for all of these distinguished teams that have been recognized today, to keep them incoming, and we will forward them. So certainly that's the purpose of us getting around here. So we will bring these proceedings for the moment to close. Of course, thank you all you winning teams and viewers for participating in this discussion. Congratulations, of course, to the winners, especially the first place winners that we'll be welcoming here at the Creative Spark here in Geneva. I want to thank, of course, our participants, but of course our jury, and in particular Ambassador Thomas Grimminger, Professor Nayef Al-Rodhan, Mr. Niko Orell, Ms. Anne-Caroline Pizis-Martel. Also, of course, the GCSP staff, in particular my colleagues, Christine Garnier-Simon and Ines Casal-Bosch and others who've really made this online event possible. Of course, everyone's involved in this year's Transformative Futures Prize, and we hope we'll see you in future occasions soon. So looking forward to staying connected with you. All the best. Have a nice rest of the day. And that is goodbye from all of us here at the GCSP in Geneva.